The Apple Watch Series 10 comes in two new sizes. There's the 42mm version as well as the 46mm version. Now, both sizes are going to be larger than last year, and the question is, which size should you get? Well, today I've got both sizes here in front of me and on my wrist, and in this video we're going to be comparing them to see how they look on my wrist, as well as see how WatchOS differs on each, and finally talk about the pros and cons of each size to help you decide which is right for you. Alright, so to start, I want to briefly talk you through my spec and why I chose it, and the reason for this is that now more than ever, there are so many different buying options when choosing to get your Apple Watch that you want to make sure you get the right case and band combo to suit your needs. Now, what I chose to go for is the jet black finish for the watch case, as well as the sports band in black, and you'll see that I've done that here for both sizes, and the reason for this is I think this is the best combination for the Apple Watch Series 10, especially if you are new to the Apple Watch. Let me tell you why. Okay, so first of all, the jet black finish of the watch case I think is the most versatile color compared to, for example, the silver as well as the rose gold, because this dark color is going to pair with any outfit and match any occasion, whether it be more casual or more formal occasions. Black will always pair. And what I really like about the jet black color in particular, that unlike the other colors, it actually has a polished finish. As you can see, as I angle my watch here into the light reflects really nicely, and this is unlike the other colors, the silver and rose gold, which actually have a matte finish, and to me this polished look makes the watch feel and appear more premium. And then to pair with the watch case, I chose to go for the black sports band. Now, this I think is a great starter band. First of all, is for its versatility, right? Just like the watch case, it comes in black, and this I think is a great color to pair with any outfit. Of course, it naturally pairs perfectly with the jet black watch case, but I also really like it for its comfortability. It is super comfortable to wear this band, and that is because this rubber texture is so smooth and soft. It's not gonna like get stuck anywhere or say pull on your arm hairs or anything like that, and that makes this a really good starter band. Not to mention, this band is also super easy to clean. So if, say, after a workout, you can just take off your Apple Watch, quickly detach the band, and then I recommend putting it in, say, a glass with a little bit of dish soap and warm water, and that's then instantly going to clean your watch band. So this here is a really great starter band. I've personally been buying these sports bands for many years, and I can tell you they're also really durable and definitely last. Now, one thing I do also recommend with this particular band is that you go for the version that has the buckle. Now, you also have a version on Apple Store that is the solo loop version, and this in theory has no buckle, and what you do is you choose your size beforehand, and you don't have to, you can't adjust the size from there. You just put on the watch and it fits, and this can be nice in theory, but in practice your wrist does change size. More specifically, during warmer weather or during a workout, your wrist will slightly expand, and then in colder weather, let's say during the winter, your wrist will slightly become slimmer, in which case you want to be able to adjust your band. So having that adjustability with the buckle version of the band I think is great. As you can see, it's super easy to change the tightness. There you go, if I want to make it tighter, and then fold the loop underneath for a really clean look. So that's why I chose this spec. Again, to recap, it's going to be the jet black watch case with the black sports band, and again, I'll leave the purchase links to this exact configuration in the description. Alright, so now that we've talked about the spec, let's talk about comparing the 42mm version versus the 46mm version. So let's start off with price. Now, the 42mm version will come in at $399 or 399 pounds, where the 46mm version of the Series 10 comes in at $429 or 429 pounds. Now, this is a relatively small difference in price, but believe me, this is a big difference in feel and wearability between these two watches. So before I take these watches and put them on my wrist, let's compare the watches off the wrist to see how they differ. So right away, as you can see, there is a very substantial difference in size. Now, the 46mm version here in my left hand is going to be 4mm taller and 3mm wider than the 42mm version, and this, as you can see, is very apparent also off wrist. So you can definitely see there's a pretty substantial size difference here between the two. Yet despite the 46mm version being larger, it is actually not thicker, so the thickness of the two watches is going to be identical, both being noticeably thinner compared to the older Series 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 by about 10%. So this is a difference in thickness that you do feel. I'd say the difference is mainly applied here to the heart rate sensor on the back, and this is actually great for comfortability and wearability, as it means that the watch won't dig into your wrist as much. So I found the Series 10 for this reason to be particularly more comfortable to wear compared to previous versions. However, it is important to note that because of the difference in height as well as width, the 42mm version does have a significantly smaller volume, and this does mean that this version is going to be easier to say slide under the cuff if you're someone who often wears suits, so that is something to bear in mind between the two sizes. And then flipping them over to the side here, you'll see that we have the same digital crown as well as the side button. Even the speakers on the other end are going to be the same. So we have two very fine grills here for the speakers. That is new on the Series 10. Now, in terms of the weight, they're also quite different. So the 42mm version, the lighter version, weighs just 30 grams, where the 46mm version weighs in at 36.4. Now, both are going to be also lighter compared to previous years. Now, between the two, I would say the weight difference is very minor and isn't something that you really notice on the wrist. Okay, so enough of that. Let's take a look and see how each watch wears on the wrist and how they differ. So for context, I have 155mm wrist, or 6.1 inches when measured around in circumference. So that's important for you to know, because that'll kind of put into context how my wrist compares to yours, and therefore how these sizes will look on your wrist. So let's go ahead and put them on here. On the left hand, I'm going to put the larger 46mm version. Again, super easy to apply. Love this sports band. And then here on the right, I'm going to put the 42mm version. And here we go. As you can see, I now have both watches on my wrist. And well, as you can see, the size difference is substantial and also immediately noticeable. So those few millimeters really do go a long way, particularly looking here at the larger 46mm version. What you'll notice is that the watch case in terms of height is just about, or only a little bit shorter, or rather less tall than my wrist is wide. So that is something to bear in mind, where here on the 42mm version, there's a lot more room between my wrist and the watch case. You can see that my wrist is a little bit wider, definitely by a good centimeter, maybe centimeter and a half or so, compared to the watch case. So that does immediately give a more proportionate look on the 42mm version versus the larger 46mm version. Now, because the 46mm Series 10 has that larger watch case, not only is the case bigger, but the band itself actually sticks out further from my wrist on both sides before folding down and turning around, where the 42mm version, as you can see, sits more flush. I'll give you a top-down view here of what I'm talking about. So again, the 42mm just sort of hugs my arm a little bit closer, as opposed to the larger 46mm version. Now, I wouldn't consider this to be a problem, because as you can see, if I have my wrists, both of them here on the side of my desk, you'll see that the watch cases do not hit the table. So you're not going to be scratching your watch case if, say, you're typing or working, so you don't have to worry about that. But this is more from an aesthetic, from a looks perspective, saying here that the 42mm version does sit a little bit more flush. Now, again, wearing the two watches, I would say that the difference in weight is not really noticeable at all, but I do notice the difference in bulk. So combining the larger watch case in terms of height, as well as the width, and of course the slightly larger band that comes with it, I do notice the 46mm version here on my left arm more than I do the 42mm version on my right arm. By no means obtrusive, but the 42mm version just wears a little bit lighter and is just harder to notice, and I think more quickly that you'll forget that you're even wearing it, as opposed to that larger size. And again, going back to sleeves, if you wear a suit often, you wear a cuff, even sweaters or jumpers, anything like that, the smaller 42mm version will be easier to slip in and out from under a cuff, simply because of its smaller size, as opposed to the slightly more bulky 46mm version. Now, of course, both watches do have very nice rounded corners, and because the thickness is the same, it's not a problem with the larger size, but again, it's just that little bit easier on the smaller 42mm version. So at the end of the day, which size is best for you? Well, this really comes down to two things. One, personal preference, and two, it's going to be your wrist size. I would say if your wrist is similar in size to mine or smaller, go for the smaller 42mm version, as I think this looks best and also fits most proportionately. And this doesn't just apply for us gentlemen, but also for ladies who typically have slightly smaller wrists. You probably want a more elegant timepiece as opposed to a bigger, more bulky computer on your wrist, in which case, again, too, I would recommend the 42mm version. But let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Okay, so in terms of a physical wearability perspective, the 42mm version wears best. But the question is, does the 46mm version have any advantages? Well, yes, it does. In fact, because of its larger display, you get more pixels, and this means you can see more text and menus at a time, which will make it more comfortable to operate and use. But it is important to note that particularly with the Series 10 compared to previous years, I found this difference to not be as big as previous years. Where last year, comparing the 45mm version to at the time the 41mm version, you saw a significant difference in how text was displayed. You got a lot more lines of text on the 45mm version, and this really made it a lot more comfortable to use. Where this way, I think Apple has done a great job making the smaller 42mm version feel not as small, if that makes sense. They've really optimized WatchOS very well to make the two more similar than ever. And I think they've done that by this year not prioritizing more text, for example, on the larger 46mm version, but rather slightly larger text, which will make it easier to read at a glance. But in terms of the content, you'll see in the comparisons that we do in a sec here, they actually fare quite similarly. All right, so starting off here with the watch face, of course, you'll immediately see the size difference. I think the time here is pretty easy to read on both, but things like the complications in the corner are going to be more comfortable to see and particularly to tap on here if you are using the larger 46mm version. But of course, like I said, still very much possible on the smaller 42mm version as well. Pulling up the handy today view, as you can see, they operate and look very similar on both sizes. And if I scroll through the different cards, you'll see that the number of cards displayed too is going to be identical. So we get 2 cards here on each screen. But of course, each card will be slightly larger on the 46mm version, making it just that little bit more comfortable to say view text or tap into a card to see more info. But in terms of the amount of content, you'll see they fare very similarly. And then going over to the home screen here, you'll see, first of all, of course, the layout will be larger on the 46mm version, but importantly, we see the exact same number of apps on both sizes. So if we look at the corners here of the display, you'll see the news icon as well as that small stocks icon there in the bottom is visible on both watches. So again, you get larger icons on the 46mm version, but unlike previous years, you don't get more, as the same amount of apps will be visible on the 42mm version. Next, let's jump into an application. So let's say the settings app here and compare the two. Again, we have 3 different cards, 3 options visible on both. You will see though that the Smart Stack option is a little bit more visible on the 46 versus the 42mm version. Again, accessible on both, but the text size is going to be the biggest difference here between the two. And the same can be said here as we scroll through. So as you can see, the two fare very similarly. Again, more so than previous years. The bigger emphasis is going to be on the difference in the size of the text rather than the amount of content shown. And now one of my favorite features of the Apple Watch is the ability to read and view messages. So something you're probably going to do quite often. So let's see how the two compare. So here I have an identical text message on both Apple Watches. And as you can see, there is a pretty substantial difference here. So both watches do manage to show me the entire message. But of course, because the 46mm version is a little bit wider and taller than the 42mm version, we not only get more text shown per line. As you can see, each line is going to be a little bit wider. So for example, here, the first line, your Waitrose order, whereas on the 42mm version, it just can't squeeze the word order on there. So that means the text will be longer to read and will take up a little bit more screen space, because on the 46mm version already, we have the ability to tap into the text field right at the bottom here to respond, where we don't have that yet on the 42mm version until we first scroll slightly and are then able to respond. Speaking of responding, let's take a look at the keyboard, a really useful feature on the Apple Watch. I would never use this to type out a paragraph, but for a quick couple of words, if you're in a position where you can't use the voice dictation feature, this can be useful. And again, this too is going to be where the larger 46mm version does shine, because the keys are going to be slightly larger, a little bit less cramped, and just that bit more comfortable to use than the 42mm version. Though I am very glad that Apple have kept this feature even on their smaller size, because it may look cramped, and well, it is, but it is still usable. So this brings me to the ultimate question, and that is which size is going to be best now that we've looked at not just the wearability perspective, but also the software perspective. And I think it's important to remember, first of all, that both the 46mm version as well as the 42mm version are identical in terms of their features and in terms of their performance, their functionality, even battery life is the same. Yes, the 46mm version does have a larger battery, but of course it does also have a larger screen. So the two kind of balance out and result in similar all-day battery life. So ultimately, which size is best for who? Well, I would say that the 42mm version is going to be the more comfortable wear, and also I think is going to look most proportionate on most people's wrists. Now, the 46mm version is going to be, of course, that little bit more comfortable to use and to interact with. So comfortable wear versus comfortable usability, with again, slightly larger icons, a little bit more text available on screen, albeit with a slightly more bulky feel on the wrist compared to the more proportionate 42mm version. My advice is, if your wrist in size is 155mm or 6 inches in circumference or below, go for the 42mm version, where if your wrists are going to be bigger than that, the 46mm version may be best. I've said this before in this video, but I just want to really hammer this point down that with the Series 10 specifically, Apple have done a great job at making the smaller size Apple Watch feel less small. And they've done that not just by making the watch bigger compared to last year's 41mm version, but also in terms of the difference when comparing it to the 46mm version. Like I said, when it comes to the software and how you interact with the watch, the difference between the two sizes is smaller than on previous years. And this, I think, is a really good thing as well. Ultimately, I recommend the smaller 42mm version for most people. Let me know if you have any questions at all. I hope this video was helpful to you if you are picking between the two sizes Apple Watches. As always, I will leave the purchase links to both sizes down in the description. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you check out my Apple Watch Series 10 First 10 Things to Do video to help you set up and get the most out of these watches in terms of their features as well as battery life. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.